What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Longbox Sessions. I'm your host, Alex Dandino.
And I'm Josh Griffey.
As always, catch us on all your socials, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. We're all over the place. You can see our faces. You're welcome. Also, if you're checking us out on YouTube, hopefully you're watching us on the Nerd Alchemist channel.
Plural.
Tell all your friends.
Nerd Alchemist, plural, with an S at the end. That's right.
You're included.
Home
the Chubby
of-
Mansion is no more.
Well, the Chubby Mansion is eternal. Let's not be kidding. We're just using a more clever right? It's like when Wile E. Coyote used to paint the side of the cliff. He still wants you to feel the pain and torture, but he also wants it to be more inviting.
Perfect.
But yeah,
that was perfect analogy.
Home of the Longbox Sessions podcast, home of the Film Alchemist podcast. If you're finding us on audio, especially Apple Podcast app, please leave us a rating and a couple sentence review would help us out enormously. So we've been off for a while. Let's get back to business.
Guys, thank you so much. We are back. We took a couple weeks off. We had some other stuff to get to. Sometimes, life finds a way. I think I've said that before. We're doing it again. But we're back. It's the end of the month. We're here to have a good time. But more importantly, we're here to have the Long Box Book Club. We promised you we'd do it. We're definitely doing it. We are covering the one, the only, Batman.
This is mine.
The Long Halloween.
The Long Halloween. Little action cover.
Yeah. Batman, The Long Halloween, Jeff Loeb, Tim Sale, 96-97. One of my, if not the favorite of mine, favorite Batman books.
Not my favorite, but I do believe we agreed on this as the definitive Batman book, right?
Was this our definitive Batman?
I believe it was, and as you guys know, it's been a long time since we've done a definitives, which we'll have to get back to. I will say this. But yeah, our theory is
you're right.
You hand one book to an alien who's new to our planet that best summarizes a character in comic book form, and I still contend, while not my favorite, Long Halloween is probably the best one-run distillation of everything that is great about Batman.
Yes, I would fully agree. It is definitely my favorite. In college, I picked it up again, having not read Batman for actually many years. But I picked it up, and it just floored me again. Or floored me for the first time, and then floored me for the 100 other times I read it on its own. It's also, by and large, probably the most popular to take the cool things from and adapt into movies.
Yeah,
definitely in a lot of respects has been adapted for the Nolan trilogy, particularly.
Well, actually, on the cover of my book is a quote from Christopher Nolan. So,
large chunks of the triumvirate that we'll get to were taken to use in the Dark Knight movie. But first things first, let's talk about our experience reading it. Griffey, do you remember the first time you read this book?
Man, I don't remember I think I was in a junior in college, maybe. It was the first time I think I had read like a couple issues when they were first coming out, but I had no idea what was going on. It's one of those books, like, back in the day, I was just like, oh, look, that's a cool-looking Joker cover. I was like, I took a break in high school where I was kind of around comics, still like in the wheelhouse, but I wasn't really collecting a lot. Right. And then, I think it was later in college when I had gotten back in with non-hero books, and then I found this, and it really just floored me, honestly. It's disarmingly simple on the surface, but there's so much going on, especially this reading it again, right? Because what I always remember is that it's just this, I think that's the phrase I would settle on. It's disarmingly simple kind of mystery tale, right? But reading it this time, there's so much layering they do constantly. So every book is running 3 or 4 parallel narratives and using them as almost this funhouse infinity mirror setup, right? That takes us really much deeper into Gotham and a lot of these characters than other books that really play more on the dark and brooding and convoluted ever get.
Right. For those of you who haven't read it, you should pick it up and read it. But if you're listening to the show...
For 20 years ago.
Yes. If you're listening to the show today or tonight, or whenever you're listening, the book, The Long Halloween, takes place early in Batman's career. It's supposed to be set in the year one continuity itself. I was actually reading before the show. This was actually a thing that Jeff Loeb pitched, and basically on inspiration from Mark Waid. Mark Waid suggested telling a story in the year one continuity about Harvey Dent, which is a story that had not really been encountered before. I will say this. There was originally supposed to be a Harvey Dent Two-Face story in the Batman 66 series that they ended up putting in comic book form, which was actually pretty cool. But nevertheless, that's neither here nor there. I absolutely love this Batman run. It's probably one of the few times I've read, besides Watchmen, read voiceover in a book and not been totally fucking annoyed the entire time.
Really? See, I love voiceover.
It's probably one of my biggest pet peeves. I absolutely despise it on so many levels.
I'll tell you what I hate, right? Is when people forsake, because this one does a lot of voiceover. Whereas,
it's almost all voiceover. Right.
The thing I can't stand is when they're like, well, we don't want to do voiceover, so we'll have characters just say what they're looking at or what they're doing. That's the comic book send to me, right? That's like Golden Age comic books. If you are telling me the exact action that I am visually looking at, that's where I'm going. But I think this book does a clever job with its voiceover of the character speaking in voiceover often is talking about something different.
Right.
I mean, that's a pretty classic comic book trope, but this book uses it really effectively.
I mean, this is Jeff Loeb probably I think this might be one of Jeff Loeb's finest books. Like between this, I'd say Hulk Gray.
Oh, I think this is better than all the color books, to be fair.
Right, but I mean, as far as like how he writes, this is easily his like best use of like his narrative technique, which is mainly voiceover. If you've read Hush, this is another one that he does that actually leans pretty heavily on the trope. But Jeff Loeb is like the definitive writer for this style of writing. And I think to juxtapose it with Tim Sale's art, which is just like incredible on so many levels.
Yeah.
Again, I'm a huge Tim Sale art fan. I like art that is not, I would say, necessarily anatomically correct. I don't know if that's the right way to put it, but it's like Tim Sale's anatomy of people is shockingly weird. I also love the way he draws noses. But he's just it's one of those things I always notice, particularly about his art. Also, if you'll also notice the lettering is done by him, or the lettering is not done by him. It's done by Richard Starkings, and Comic Craft. But the lettering itself is his is a pastiche on his handwriting, which is a very important aspect of whenever Tim Sale and Jeff Loeb do books together. Usually, that is the type of lettering they use. It's interesting.
Yeah, I think it's funny. I've never quite settled on what it is about Sale's artwork I like, and I'm like that across the spectrum. I'm one of those guys. I respect Alex Ross and like his abilities, but I would never care to own like an Alex Ross work, right? To me, the comic book world, one of the things I like, and I think Tim Sale, it's almost a similar quality you see in cinema with like Tim Burton, right? Where it's something that looks absurd and not right to your eye, but somehow fits the world it's in, right? And I think especially in this Batman book, it really kind of pulls us into this. It's almost becomes a darker fairy tale.
Yeah.
And I think what's really fun, too, is the way, like, when you get a character like the Joker, he's done to such an anatomical extreme, right? Him, the Scarecrow, a lot of them, that when we swing back over to, like, the Gordon's house, you can kind of feel the style tightening again a little. So I think there's this really fun, kind of Wonderland quality to Tim Sale at times. It's very much like Jeff Lemire and, Matt Kent. There are a lot of these guys that have what feels like a lesser artistic style, but it adds a lot by not. This is what we talked about in the reinventing comics, right? There's the different, super high quality, detailed, unquality. When it's not so detailed, right? Like it's not like Wrightson's Frankenstein. It lets your brain add in a little bit of those gaps, which I think this book does really well too.
I also want to note that Tim Sale's Batcape is my favorite of all Batcapes.
Oh man, Kelly Jones is by far my Batman.
I know you're a big Kelly Jones guy, but I just like the way Tim Sale draws Batman's cape in this is so, and the cape and cowl, because he does the high pointy ears, sort of like Kelly Jones, which I really like. But I love this cape because it also has that sort of Spawn quality of just like, how big is that fucking thing?
That's why I like Kelly. I want Spawn to see Batman's cape and go, fuck. Like, he's so jealous. Like, what's the point of hell generaling?
Right. That's exactly the reason I love this cape. It's just, it sort of has a life of its own, and it does such a good job of also creating the shadows you need to really engage the product. Again, I love this book. Like, I go on for hours, and we probably will. But nevertheless, I don't want to go beat for beat because I think that's kind of silly. But essentially,
maybe month by month.
Ooh, nicely done.
Yeah, not necessarily like every page, but I do think, especially in this book too,
the pacing of it is very important.
I don't know that I'm not necessarily a fan of gimmicks like this, but I must say, I think the structure and skeleton of this story is really used to its most fascinating extent, right?
Well, let's be honest. Like,
to me at the start,
how often have you sat there and gone, "Oh, great, monthly. I love following the like." You know, it's Calendar Man features pretty heavily, and you're like, great, can't wait to follow Calendar Man's story.
Well, it plays perfectly to me because I despise the theory of having to buy my comic books one at a time every month.
Oh yeah,
right.
Absolutely, that's the best part of
ruse that the comic book industry always is perpetrating. Like, you have to buy the books and then buy the trade, or else we'll collapse. It's like, no, you won't. Like every other business, you'll find a way to give me what I want the way I want it.
Like
that's just
The Long Halloween might be the greatest proliferation of the trade paperback ever created. Like,
but it also works because this is the only book where you're like, maybe month to month would matter. I would like to go back and see if they were releasing them in the proper months.
Oh, that'd be interesting.
You know what I mean?
I don't know.
Actually follow the calendar in the Batman book. Like, did you get Christmas in December?
So it's a 13-issue book,
right?
So maybe yes. Who knows?
If they
I don't
had
know.
To have done it that way, right? They had to have.
Oh, I mean, it released 96 to 97, so you must assume that they probably started sometime in the fall, right? That would make sense. Again, I absolutely. I think like the things that are important about this book are much less about like. I mean, I want to say it's about, obviously it's important to tell a great story and everything, but really the way it's presented to us and the way that we read it, particularly month to month like that, should be gimmicky and kind of like Batman 66-ish, and does that to some effect, but at the same time, it still goes deep into sort of this like darkness that we're not necessarily supposed to embrace. We totally are into it. Like, especially like getting toward like Christmas is a Joker issue, which is probably like one of the more disturbing things that you get in the book is that you get the fucking Joker at Christmas, and I don't know. I mean that's not even one of my favorite issues, but I really do enjoy it no less. It's just a fascinating read altogether. It's because it's a hard-boiled detective story. It's a detective story. It's a whodunit. And at the same time, it's a superhero story that's about really the escalation of a superhero. And something we've talked about a lot on the show, which is like, is Batman the reason or is he the solution?
Yeah.
Like, we talk about that a lot.
I mean, I think this is the funny thing is, so the book sets up on the very first page, right, is Bruce Wayne telling us that he believes in Gotham. And I think it's important that it's Bruce Wayne and not Batman, because it kind of starts in this Godfather situation, right? What I think is the most interesting decision they make is Batman in this story kind of functions as one fly in the ointment and two fly on the wall. We see Gotham through Dent and Gordon and Falcone, and not really Batman. Batman is there for our splash pages, but I don't feel this is the Batman mystery where I feel he is the furthest behind. Batman does not feel like he's driving this case forward a lot of times, right?
Oh, not at all. Batman takes a back seat, and like again, this is like the benefit of telling a story in the early years of Batman's career, because the version of Batman we all know and love is someone who's been around the block. Mm-hmm. This is a version of Batman that's still learning how to be Batman. There's still so much he doesn't necessarily know or do, and like that shows in running into supervillains. He's often sort of ill-prepared and doesn't understand exactly what he's. I mean, I feel like the Scarecrow sequence alone, the Mother's Day issue, is probably one of my favorites, and that probably more than anything, sort of crystallizes this whole thing that Batman's not quite the Batman we all have come to understand or rely on.
Well, not even that Batman's, because this is the thing, yeah, he's not fully fledged Batman like we know him. Like he's not the Batman who could stand at the head of the Justice League table yet. You know what I mean?
No, right? Yeah.
But there is something about him. I think what's funny is that this one they pair him a lot as the anchor on the shoes of these characters, which is funny. Like they have a line in the first book, Crime, where Dent and Gordon are waiting on him, and they're kind of debating, what's up with this guy. And I think Dent even says he must be hell on a marriage. And it's kind of a funny line, right? But what you actually think about is that he's kind of, because Gordon makes it very clear that they have to make a pact right there on that roof. We want to solve this Falcone bullshit.
Right.
But we can't go over the line. And Batman's the one who waits and says it last. And what it does is, as you get deeper and deeper in the book, you see this. Harvey Dent looks at Batman as this kind of catharsis character.
Yeah.
And Gordon looks at him as this fucking warning sign down the road.
Sure.
And Falcone's relation with Batman is interesting because they have several stare downs. And that just feels like he almost plays as like the ghost of Christmas Future to Falcone. So there is this weird, I feel like we get almost no Bruce Wayne that matters, right? He has his grandstand at the bank, but even that fairly minimal.
Yeah.
Right? And we don't, it is the rare Batman story, especially one that is such a whodunit, where Batman is really our reflective surface in this one. Because it's obvious, like we talk about this a lot. The reason Batman's Rogues Gallery is the best is they are all versions of Batman.
Right.
But this one, it's not even about, I'm just fighting my inner demons. He is exposing truth to so many different characters in this book.
Right.
Even Catwoman in a weird way. I think that was the one thing in the story I didn't remember. I have to say, if this book has one thing I don't love, it's Catwoman.
Interesting.
I've had enough of the bat and mouse games, the cat and bat games. Like, I'm over it. How many scenes do we have to see her with, like, her little fucking creeper goggles and her, radio ear, and then Batman asks her a question, and she says, "Not today," and dives off a roof. I was like, 13 issues of this. We make a choice. What the fuck?
13 issues of Catwoman being very Catwoman-y.
Yeah.
I mean,
I wanted Catwoman to make one decision in this book. And you can say she maybe did, but they're pretty soft decisions. In a story like this, I wanted Catwoman to have the moment where she makes a decision. And we're using Batman as a way to show us something about Catwoman. I feel like we never got that scene.
I mean, well, here's the problem with that is, and I don't remember if they knew the follow-up came out, like Dark Victory, which is the sequel book series, came out 99 to 2000, I think. Mm-hmm. And that kind of more crystallizes Catwoman's story and even has its own offshoot, like subplot story called Catwoman When in Rome, which Loeb and Sale did as well. Because you find out in that book more to the point that like what she's doing in the mix. Mm. But this one, she is just sort of like this weird, I don't know what the purpose of her. Obviously she's one of the Rogues Gallery, but at the same time, it's still not fully crystallized in this book exactly what her role is there besides just like cock teasing Batman the entire time.
Yeah, it's just one of those, if she's going to get that many pages.
Yeah.
I wanted that to matter to me, and she never quite mattered in the story in a meaningful narrative way, right? I feel like, and that's the funny thing, every other character I feel got that scene. Or at least any character of import, not the rogues per se, but
I guess the main thing that I would think of is the reason she's really there is for the Poison Ivy storyline that happens. Like, that's probably the big to-do.
Even then, why can't Alfred come in with the weed whackers, right? He could come in with the lawnmower like Dead Alive. Handle business. I kick ass for the Lord. And Alfred's just over there. Pow, pow, pow. Alfred gets some good scene.
What a shout-out.
What a shout-out.
Yeah, I don't know. That's probably the only main thing. Again, Catwoman is an important facet of moving Batman's story along, but pretty much inconsequential as far as the plot actual, like, Calendar Man has more of a bearing on the plot moving forward than Catwoman. And Calendar Man spends the entire time behind bars, which is pretty funny.
The only thing I latched onto about Catwoman is there is a line when Batman, she jumps off the roof and he's like, she treats this like a game. It's not a game. And by the end of the book, you're kind of left almost laughing at that statement, right? You're like, this is only a game. This is only a child's game if we're being 100% fair. You know, Calendar Man, I know, let me out. They spare the Riddler. It's all, I mean, they do all these, who done it, who did it, this and that. And all we really see, what is the constant repetitive theme of this book, right, is a question that Batman asks, I think, every character except for Harvey Dent. He asked Falcone, and I believe he asked Gordon, too, who I think is Chief Gordon at this point. Not Commissioner Gordon, but yeah,
Sergeant or something.
But it's the question of, is it worth it? Right? This is the theme of the book, essentially, right? Because you could say the theme is, what does Batman believe in? Because they do that a couple, right? The first book ends with I believe in Gotham, I believe in Gordon, I believe in Dent. The fucking house explodes. You're like, well, you're believing in nonsense, it feels like. And then later, it's an affirmation of, well, I believe in me at least. Well, all right. That's cool. Right. I mean, you already do exercise every day, so I know you believe in yourself. Right? But the question that is inherent to this story, which this is the theme that is reinforced the most effectively throughout, is it worth it? Right? So every character you have playing a zero-sum game, right? So if we go through, Gordon thinks he's going to be a by-the-book cop. He's making no valuable difference, and his wife and child are abandoned, essentially. Harvey Dent thinks he's doing what's right, is venturing over the line, to where eventually he makes a deal with the devil that gets his face burned off, maybe and brings his wife in on a crime, and they don't have a kid, right? Falcone, not close with his children, being just phased out based on time, man. Like, so there's this whole, what is the value of what he did? And the most clever take on this that they do is the Thomas Wayne scene. I actually thought was a brilliant addition to the mythology, right? Which is
the flashback.
Yeah, when Thomas Wayne on Father's Day actually saves Falcone on his table, right? And he's like, I don't want your money, but he's a doctor, right? And Alfred even says he's bound by, being a good man. He would have done that for anyone who comes to the door. And Bruce, and maybe the most, kettle versus pot debate of all time is, if my father hadn't saved him, none of this would be happening to me. You're like, wow, that's a hot take from fucking Batman. After you had just put the Joker back in Arkham and all this other bullshit you've just been letting happen. That's a hot take from Batman. But again, even Batman is questioning the value of his father being just a good man.
Sure.
And that's this is the question I would pose to you. Is any of it worth it, right? That's what the book is asking.
Well, I mean, that's the inherent value of Batman is anybody worth it? Like, I mean, really, I would actually even harken back to Batman versus Superman when when Bruce says to Alfred, how many good men are left in Gotham? How many stayed that way? That's really kind of the crystallization of the Batman story in general is does it really matter?
Yeah.
Obviously not. Otherwise the city would be a fucking utopia. But every conceivable reality
when Swamp Thing took over and then the Bat Devil took it back.
But every conceivable reality besides that one that ends with Batman let's say taking over. Even in Mark Waid and Alex Ross doing Kingdom Come, Batman's Gotham of the future is literally a police state.
Yeah.
He literally has bat sentinels just rolling all over town trying to undo crime. There's no world in which Batman wins and Gotham becomes this utopia because that's just not what Gotham is. That's not what the city is versus Batman anyways.
Well, they talk about when he goes to Arkham, right? And he's like, have you noticed there's double the amount of prisoners since you've shown up? And he's like, no, I don't think about things like that. I believe in Batman. Wow, cool.
Well, but that's another great example of what is interesting about Batman regardless. And something that I think Jeff Loeb's willing to stick his tongue so far in his cheek he could make it bleed by pointing these kinds of things out.
Yeah.
and going throughout the book and really kind of like, I mean, honestly, that's what this book is about, is the escalation of Batman from mob boss breaker to supervillain chaser. Because that's really kind of like how this whole thing goes is, again, this is borrowed from, this is what The Dark Knight borrows pretty well from this book, which is you put faith in men you don't trust and people you don't necessarily trust, freaks, so to speak. Like, you're going to set someone loose on Gotham, it's going to be hard to put that genie back in the bottle. So when you have people like the Joker and Poison Ivy and, I mean, even Solomon Grundy, who tries to keep to himself, but everyone seems to bother him. I feel really bad for Solomon Grundy most of the time.
If someone just walked into your house, you'd want to drown them too. Stop doing that to Solomon. Come on.
So, I mean, like, actually, that's probably one of my favorite scenes in the book after Harvey escapes from the hospital and he's in the sewers and he's like, he asks Solomon Grundy, like, who are you? And he goes, Solomon Grundy, born on a Monday. And you're like, and he says to himself, never ask a question you don't really want the answer to.
Right.
Like, that's like one of my favorite, like, kind of like throwaway moments in the book. But I also think it's a really important beat because, truthfully, in terms of what we're talking about, like, everyone asks questions they don't want the answers to because the answers are so terrible and so difficult in this book. Because what's the answer to less, supervillains? Probably no Batman.
Yeah.
Like, probably murdering all these guys in cold blood. Like, that's the answer. That's the solution to your problem.
Yeah,
like,
I mean, this is I think you said it, the genie's out of the bottle. Well, Batman is the genie.
Totally.
That's the part of the equation that is false because what happens is Batman becomes wish fulfillment, right? Gordon does this deal with the devil. He doesn't like it, but Batman helps him get his cases done and toes the line enough, right? Gordon doesn't witness any crime, so he's like, it's all right. But later in the book, there's a scene where you're like, fuck, Gordon had to know what was happening, and he still makes it. So we won't jump all the way ahead, but Batman lets a man get murdered right in front of Gordon. It is criminal adjacent, right? It is accessory to murder adjacent in an attempted entrapment, right? And Gordon plays with that. Batman has always been the deal with the devil with Gordon, but this one's a little different. And for Harvey starts to unravel as his attempts to follow the law aren't working and starts thinking a little more. Like, there's the scene where him and Batman are the ones that go to burn down the money warehouse.
Right.
He's kind of like, oh, we took some of the money. And Batman's like, no, we won't. Right. Batman.
That's like, well, Batman. That's like one of.
That's
one of
rich
another
white
one of my
people
favorites.
problems. Like, I have enough money. I don't want to have to build another money warehouse. Jesus, come on, Harvey.
Well, how great is that moment too when Dent's like, man, if it was any other guys, and he literally cuts like, don't even say it.
Yeah.
Like, don't even speak the words.
But that's the thing.
But
Batman's standing there with Harvey as Harvey lights the match, right? Batman is complicit in that moment. That is an outside of the law move, which they essentially claim they wouldn't do to Gordon because they need to break something loose in the case, right? So I've always thought Two-Face is probably the most interesting rogue for Batman to pair with.
Well, absolutely.
Because of this, they're so parallel, right? This is almost a brother journey. But in this book, Batman being right there when Harvey starts doing this is crazy. And they even reinforce that, too, in the fact that Batman and Harvey start to suspect each other. Right? Because in each other, they can see the flaws which they refuse to acknowledge about themselves. Like, Who obviously would be the most likely guy to be doing this? Batman or Harvey Dent.
Right.
That's what I think is really clever about this book is every month has just a wide open kind of philosophical theme, sometimes loosely tied to a holiday, right? Like there is a fathers and sons, there is a Bruce weeping at his mother's cemetery, like that. There is a loose relationship, right? I think actually probably most effectively done on the Valentine's Day issue. When you see after all of this is played out, right? Batman's alone on a roof. And then later, Harvey comes home with a box of chocolates. His wife's passed out. He wakes her up. And Gordon comes home with the same box of chocolates.
Right.
And, his wife and kid are asleep, passed out on a chair. She looks like every mom we know is just like, I fucking hit my wits end and I just collapsed. It's the same box that's at the scene of the crime. And so it's this, who do we really love and how do we love them? You know, do they really love their wives and this and that, or does that box of chocolate symbolize that they're more in love with this kind of faux heroic journey that they need to tell themselves, right?
Right.
Do we all mask our shortcomings by these kind of falsely heroic gestures? Like, you know, Gordon in the book even says, like, honey, I get so tired of having to say sorry. And it's like, well, stop.
Yeah.
Like, if Gordon took a month off of work during this story, it still unfolds exactly the same. Gordon is absolutely useless to solving this case for the most part. You know,
right.
Like this case, he could stop and be a good husband, and he won't.
Sure.
You know, same with Dent. Same with Batman.
All of them could stop what they're doing and be a better person in general. The problem is that the pursuit of justice clouds these men so deeply that they lose sight of true justice in their lives, and they decide that they're going to devote all their time to being this person. Like, this is how you get Batman, this is how you get Commissioner Gordon, and this is definitely how you wind up with Harvey Two-Face. And, I mean, again, like, speaking of, like, the way the book is, like, laid out, this read particularly, really the formatting struck me. Like, I was telling you before the show, like, the way Jeff Loeb writes, and he's one of my favorite reads for Batman, but, like, any other book he's written, whether it be the color books for Marvel or any other superhero book, really, Hush is another example of Batman book he's written. He has a very specific pattern. Like, it's voiceover and it's pretty sparse dialogue. Like, he's not a big, like, let me show you what prose I can put on the page. Like, he's very much about,
right.
But the voiceover is probably the only thing that's really gone, like, the voiceover is very effective for me when it's written by Jeff Loeb. But it's something I was trying to figure out, and it's sort of this chicken or the egg argument, because I've seen Tim Sale's art with other writers, particularly Darwin Cook in the Superman Kryptonite book. And I notice in that book, Darwin Cook writes and Tim Sale's doing the art. It's the exact same formatting, though, where there's a lot of voiceover and there's a lot of contemplation and a lot of effort within the book to talk about, like, the psyche of Superman. So I guess my question to you would be, like, given that's the case for Tim Sale with another writer, do you think Jeff Loeb is the reason that do you think Jeff Loeb's the person that pushes this format forward, or do you think Tim Sale's art being the expressive thing that it is, maybe that's what's making a writer pull back from dialogue and letting the page breathe and mainly going for, like, pretty sparse voiceover bubbles, I guess? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, you write comics, you know.
I do.
So it's one of those things.
Unsuccessfully.
Everything we write is unsuccessful, but that's fine. You're only unsuccessful until you're wildly successful, you know what I mean?
Good point.
So what I would say is there's definitely a level of once you've done it and people trust you more, they're going to want to lean more on that, right? Like if you get a job and it's like, Jock is going to illustrate the book, you'd be like, well, I'm not fucking matching my word wits versus him. Like, he can do it. He'll sell the book. It's fine. Right? Like,
right.
And I think there's probably a part of that people have seen Tim. And Tim Sale has this kind of primal howl quality that certain artists do where they're not as worried about this kind of perfections of form and art. You know, it's just this. There's some kind of dark magic in the drawings where, you know, it looks not good, but it's so much better. So I think when you know a guy's done it and you trust him creatively and you're like, yeah, I want that fucking primal dark energy, it's easier to back up, right? I think that's just a natural. If you don't trust the artist, you're going to do more. And I think perhaps because maybe Loeb and Sale was the first truly great book where people took notice of both of them, maybe you are jocking a little of the style. Also, I mean, it did become a thing, right? At this time period, it was kind of in vogue to do let's ponder the greater nature of these characters, right?
Right.
It felt new
totally.
and clever at the time in a way that now we're like, yes, that's all we do constantly, right? Like, so I think there's probably a little bit of all that going on for sure.
Right. I mean, like, I can't remember when. I feel like maybe Superman for All Seasons might have come out immediately after or before. I can't remember off the top of my head, but, like, it's right in line with all those books. I think it probably came out immediately after, but it's the same sort of thing. But again, it's also changing style a little bit because this one is obviously like, I don't feel like I've ever seen much more control in like artistry and understanding of light and dark than with Tim Sale, who by the way is totally colorblind. It's pretty fascinating.
Yeah.
Gregory Wright's a colorist for this book. It's just absolutely beautiful. But like, again, you go back to Tim Sale's like Tim Sale draws, I think, pretty heavily with. I actually have the Dark Victory, what's called the Dark Victory Noir book, which is the totally black and white inks from the book from the original run. And I think he draws pretty heavily when it comes to Batman, pretty heavily with the black ink. Like he goes pretty deep. And it's interesting to see that, and then you read like something like Superman for All Seasons, which is much more inspired by like really Norman Rockwell paintings than anything else. But he's so heavy on shadows, and particularly the Long Halloween, like the scene towards the middle of the book. I think it's page 256 when, and again you get that awesome like flowy robe when he's like sitting up on after the bat sings up, and Harvey Dent's like, "We need to talk," and he goes, "Then talk." And it's just like
after
shadow,
he just got dragged
shadow. Yeah, I love. That's one of my favorite panels in the entire book because it's just like darkness, 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 punctuated little bit of color, darkness. It's one of the few times I think we've talked about like the colors people use for Batman's costume. It's probably one of the few times I've been like totally okay excusing the blue, so to speak, for like because his costume's blue in this book. Which again is like something a lot of people don't care about. You and I have talked a lot.
I mean, it's a choice. It's fine. It works for some books. What I think the best Batman art always exists in the shadows like that, right? Batman should be a pool in dark, kind of like a Michael Myers thing, right? Like something that comes from the darkness. It also gives us a chance to project ourselves into the character more, which I like. But what I think this book does such a great job of. They just have so many clever devices, right? Like a little tiny thing that I just totally glossed over until this read was the first time that Harvey Dent sees Wayne Manor. It's a really simple layout, right? It's like a 4-panel and then a giant 1-page, right? They just have the page extend like 1.5 inches onto the other page. So it's not a splash layout. It's just a little extra that lets you know how giant and cavernous this place is. And it's just one of those choices. Like, that's such a masterful, easy one choice, right? They just sacrifice this 1.5 inches, which you wouldn't even think to do, just to make it. So there's a lot of that, but the first time we see Albert Falcone is brilliant, right? Yeah. The whole opening, if you read the first like 10-ish pages, right? There's a lot of Bruce hiding in shadows. They do kind of the old, it's like the Dracula lighting, like I have a secret, right? Where it's just the eyes are lit. There's, blinds drawing lines on people. So what it's telling us right away is that everyone is obscured. Everyone is lying. Everyone's hiding things, right? Even if there's niceties and whatever happening. The scene I love, the first scene with Albert, it's just a totally white panel, right? With just Albert's glasses. So what it shows us is that, and Bruce Wayne's just like, I'm just looking for the bathroom. And he's like, really? It's almost like a Snape moment. And it's like, he cannot even trust that this billionaire drunkard is just looking around for a bathroom. Everyone, what it's telling you is this story is all about everyone looking for what is missing or wrong with everyone else because they don't want to do that with themselves, right? To me, that is the long Halloween. The long Halloween is that we all live in these fucking lies we tell ourselves, right? Like every day I parade around as this Josh Griffey character to the world, and it's not anything like how I probably really wish I was living. But it's these fucking myths you fall into. And this story just takes that very relatable human concept to the all the way maximum, right? With these 3, 4, I guess it's 4, because Batman I would count too. But these 4 men fighting over control of a city that none of them are helping or really changing. You get the feeling that if any one of these men disappeared from the story, nothing would change.
I mean, it's like the futility of the pursuit of justice in Gotham City is really kind of like where the story lies for me. Like, what's the point of doing all this if like the book's going to end with the entire rogues gallery sitting in a room together? We all know they're going to wind up in Arkham Asylum. We all know they're going to wind up getting out. Like, that's like the true manifestation of Batman's entire thesis, which is, I can bring good to this city. No, you can't. Not only can you not bring good, you brought the way worse with you. Like,
I mean, for sure. That's because that's the thing. Even going into this is the Harvey Dent quote, right? When he's like, they're doing our job for us. And Gordon's like, our job is not to fucking kill. What are you talking about? Right. But you can tell that there is a bit of that with Harvey.
But I mean, with Harvey, though,
in more logical question an answer to this question, because we even see Bruce questioning his father's goodness.
Right.
We see him tracking down the Joker, and he's like, you're just killing people. You're a fucking madman. And the Joker's like, what? We're both looking for this guy. We both want him off the streets. The Joker's just like, well, I'll kill all these people, and maybe he'll be in there. And Batman's like, well, I'll just show up after he's killed more people, and maybe I'll find him. So it's the thing where the Joker's just like, is Batman any less absurd than the Joker?
Right. You know? I mean, the chicken or the egg argument comes up a lot in this book. And I think that's something that's interesting because, again, like you were saying, it's deceptively simple. But the complexities required to understand, like, the moral and ethical, like, the moral violation of Batman and the ethical violations that Harvey Dent is, like, putting himself through to the point where it literally sends him over the edge. Like, because, look, I'm not saying that getting acid flung in your face, which, by the way, might be it's easily my favorite sequence in this entire book. Like, I absolutely, everything that's great about this book convalesces within those, like, 3 pages because basically it's intercut with Carmine's birthday and the parallel paneling of, Maroni throwing the acid at his face and Carmine blowing out his candles might be one of my all-time favorite, like, match cut panels ever. Like, yeah, so rad. And then you just see, like, the way Sale draws, like, him writhing on the floor in pain and screaming. And then, like, the last thing you see in that scene is the little speech bubble that says, I can still hear the sound of his screaming.
Yeah.
Like, that's the other thing, too, that I love about this book is it's weird because you don't know really the time period Batman's telling this story from. And this is something else I noticed. That's the first time he's really using, like, past tense.
I noticed that too. And I think that's a clever line because you feel like he's saying that also about himself in the alley.
Oh, interesting. I never thought of it that way.
Brilliantly placed Batman
line.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because again, it's just a moment, a man, because Harvey's obviously losing it by now. He's sitting in that, downstairs with his shirt off. Like, anytime a bro's sitting around with their shirt off, nothing good is happening.
Flipping a coin.
Yeah, not.
Like, nothing's wrong. It's fine.
This gets back again to the theme of, is it worth it and this and that, is Harvey gets a coin, and by the end, honestly, just by doing coin flips, although you get the feeling that maybe the coin is not necessarily being
on one side
deliberately used impartially, right?
Yeah.
Justice is served in a weird way. By going all the way over and using a coin and becoming this monster, he won, quote unquote. It's a really strange, one of the great moments of the book that's kind of along this line too is the moment where we all stop and ask ourselves, everyone gets asked, why stay in Gotham? These are all 3 very talented men that could all move elsewhere and be just fine.
Right.
Why stay in Gotham? They're all, and again, this gets back to my basic premise of Batman is that this is a borderline serial killer who just doesn't kill, who needs this fucking game in his life. Otherwise, he's just the orphan guy with survivor's guilt. And I think it's too much for him to bear. He needs this false cross and burden of pushing back the never-ending fucking minions of hell into the giant festering womb of Gotham.
Right.
It's an unwinnable battle for all of them. But
totally.
I love that book, too, when it's like, why don't we just leave? Because even they do it with Bruce and Selina, and then Catwoman even asks Batman. They ask Harvey, they ask Gordon. It's just, well, we can't. Well, yeah, you can. Right? This is...
Sure.
I think this is where the book adds its depth. Because it is just a very simple whodunit.
Right.
But watching these guys just go through does it even matter? You know, if bad guys are just getting one civilian gets killed the whole time, right? And mostly other than that, even the Joker doesn't kill the family at Christmas. For the most part, the book puts us in a position of ethical gray area as a reader instantly, where it's, you know, do you ever feel sympathy for a victim in this book? I never did. And that's a weird place to start from when the entire debate is this Gordon, you know, arbitrary who decides what is just and ethical.
Right.
That's where the depth comes in, is that even us as an audience, I don't know that we ever decide. I mean, we don't feel bad for the bad guys who are getting killed, and then the men are so bad to the people in their lives. I don't know that we sympathize with them heroically either.
I don't sympathize with anybody who's getting murdered in this book.
As a dad and a husband, Gordon is a piece of shit in this book. You're like,
he's terrible.
He's just a bad guy.
Well, like they try to kind of give you that moment, like the Father's Day issue at the very end when he's like putting on the tie. I'm like, nope, that's not going to work, man.
Well, also, his son's not even awake to share the moment. That's the thing that matters is the moment, not the fucking tie. I love how they all got ties in it. More like nooses at that point. You're like, all these guys should just be hanging themselves. They're so terrible. But it is the thing. Because, you know, Harvey doesn't have the problem with kids. He just didn't start a family because of his mission. That's more understandable. Same with Bruce. Gordon chose to have that kid, chose to bring him into this world. And part of his whole bullshit is, I have to keep this place safe for my kid. Give him a better Gotham. Well, you're not doing that. You're not doing a good job, and you're a negligent, non-existent father. I mean, it's the... Villainy takes so many benign forms in the world, and this book is excellent at highlighting. Because what they do is whenever we get a gangland murder, the best one is, to me, is the 4th of July, the Independence Day. When the coroner gets dumped in the water and it's just the fireworks look like blood splatter over the sky.
Totally.
Fucking fantastic. But I think the black and white is really fun. The way Loeb deploys it and when he deploys it in issues is a really good kind of jerking us around so we never get too into the pattern of here's a month, here's a philosophical debate, here's a crime. Some of them are the first things we see, like Independence Day. Some of them are moved around and jumbled. And it's always really fun to read what happens on the page right before the murder. Because they're trying to push us off into all these directions of who it could be. Right? But I think by putting all of the murders in black and white, the intended purpose is not just to, we can't see the full picture. It's to make it not as important. It doesn't matter as much. There's no vibrance or importance to these deaths.
Yeah, I mean,
that's how I take the black and white. Because honestly, I never care about any of these characters dying, which usually I would.
I generally assume the black and white is, I mean, from a visual standpoint, is meant to describe the starkness of the murder itself. Like, it's the black and white nature of life and death to me. Like, that's like the whole point of paneling and coloring that way is what Jeff Loeb and Tim Sale are saying is like, I mean, you're right. Like, it is like a matter of like, nobody cares about these people because clearly they're bad and they were going to die anyways.
We should value life, but they're all...
We should value
And also half of them are like, well, we're sitting here ready to kill, and then they get killed. Like, suck it. You know, it's like when you read like, oh, big game hunter gets murdered by lion he was trying to kill. Well, got what you got.
I mean, it's like the one that I think about the most is Father's Day. Is it Falcone who gets shot?
No,
or is it Maroney's father?
Maroney's father.
So Maroney's father gets shot. That might be one of my another favorite panel in the book is him with it, like clutching his shot father.
Yeah.
Like the way the look on his face is drawn is really fascinating. It's actually the only time I've felt sympathy for a character who had someone get killed. Like that, I felt very bad.
But his dad was also being a bit of a bastard to him. He's like, well, you could just be a man.
Totally. He was a huge piece of shit, but it's like, but again, like it goes back to, but then like,
and that was
it's
fun
juxtaposed.
Too, because again, it's the cyclical, like, if I would have done it right, now my useless dipshit son wouldn't be failing.
Exactly. It's juxtaposed with this story about Thomas. And again, like, this is like the genius of the way Jeff Loeb writes this book is everything is a juxtaposed narrative of, well, this is what life could be. This is what life is. And this is where this life started. because like Thomas Wayne could have, like, again, that's fortune cookie.
It's
but
the cyclical. There's no starter end, right? And if you just stay in Gotham, which in the one issue we say that all of them will, you will get brought into this. You will be caught eventually. You know, time's always running out, as this book is telling us constantly. But what I think is fun too is the black and white. I think not only kind of takes the emotion out of the moment, right? It makes it seem almost rational in a way. And it plays really well with the Joker story and the April Fool's issue, which is brilliant. Because in April Fool, all we're doing is saying every character we follow, except for Gordon, could be the killer, right? They list Falcone, Carmoni? Falcone and Carmoni, is that right?
Carmine Falcone.
Yeah, you fucking Italians with all your vowel names. But, so
Thank you for saying Italians.
Yeah, Italians. So they get those two. Then it could be Batman. Then it could be Catwoman. Right. Then it could be Falcone's sister. So it's like it's almost this absurd, well, it could be anyone. Who really cares who it is? And then you juxtapose that again. If you're playing a drinking game on how many times we say juxtaposed, you're hammered. With the Joker's kind of madcap, colorful adventure. Right. That is another duality, right? This is a really simple gun with just a very simple and efficient silencer versus the Joker's like, got a fucking plane. He's like, woo, let's kiss at midnight. Wink. Evidence for my theory again.
Well, again,
but yeah, it's doing. I think the black and white gets passed off as a classic noir moment, but I think it's doing. And this is why comics are so fun for me as a reader. Every little artistic moment like that has so much impact on the work that your brain is doing to participate in the story.
Right.
I don't think it's just noir. I think it's doing a lot.
No, not at all. I mean, I think noir, again, like, we talk about this a lot in respect to movies, but it works for comics too. Like, storytelling tropes that work over time, like framing something as a noir or framing something as like a swashbuckler or something like that. There are story tropes and story beats that work really well. I think what Jeff Loeb does is take the skeleton of a film noir and the skeleton of a hard-boiled detective story, and he takes away all of the, like, what I would call, like, the Dashiell Hammettness, which is, like, a lot of the kind of, like, again, there's still a Maltese Falcon in this book, but at the same time, like, he's taking away all of, like, what I think doesn't work, and he's implementing all the comic book stuff that works really, really well and to great effect. Yeah. And I think that's why this book still reads like a detective story, but it's not. Batman is like a terrible detective in this book.
Well, that's a good way that you phrased it to what I'm trying to say, which is the black and white part happens as a noir, right? And one of the things that I think is essential to a good noir is there is this hopelessness and inevitability to a noir that things are not going to go well.
Sure.
Right? It's a lot of Bogart just being like, well, this world fucking sucks, but I'm going to fucking smash some fuzz and drink some whiskey and fuck, right? Like, that's...
Smoke all the cigarettes.
That's how the black and white happens, right? It's like, it's another shitty day in my shitty life, right?
Right.
This book, when it's in black and white, has that vibe. And then the color parts are all characters, right or wrong, who optimistically think they will overcome the elements that are happening in the black and white segments.
Right.
It's a real... that's what I mean. It's not just a visual look, and this is something that they do well in the book, is they're constantly feeding us all these little tidbits to fucking ebb and flow us into you don't really know what's happening.
Right.
And your brain is working overtime. The April Fool's is just like an in-your-face, like, we might not even know. We might just decide on the last issue. Like, read all the evidence you want, you won't know.
Right, and that's what gets us to that, what I think is probably one of my favorite comic book endings, which is, Dent resurfaces as Two-Face. He breaks everyone out of Arkham.
We have to break this down, actually, because I have one question to start with. Sure. Why not break Calendar Man out? What a bitch move.
I mean, personally, I think from a writing perspective, I think it's mainly like a fuck you to Calendar Man.
He's like, actually, I'm doing holiday things now. You're not. That's going to be my thing now.
Maybe they didn't break him out specifically so that they couldn't just say it was Calendar Man. They would have to accuse.
Right.
They would absolutely have to accuse Alberto.
Yeah, well, this is the thing. So Batman decides we're going to move Carmine out, and that'll be our way to draw Harvey in. When they assume that Harvey is the killer, right?
Right.
This moment, Batman is absolutely complicit in this murder. Do we believe for a second that under that visor, Batman has nothing that helps him see in the dark? That Batman's going in tactically blind into a sewer. He's going to take 2 bullets, which he says are of tiny caliber and couldn't possibly hurt him, fall on the ground and let this guy get shot in the face. Even if the shot comes first, Batman is not prepared to guard this guy's body from a bullet.
Again, I would go with this is. I mean, there's. It's not just that instance. Like the other instance is literally in the courtroom when Batman's in that like Leon the Professional costume that he's wearing, so no one knows who he is, and he's literally looking around, going, "Something doesn't seem right. Like this is wrong. Something's off." Like we're seeing the work that Batman has to do to put into being Batman. And like later on, like you learn, like it's interesting because like, yeah, we all learn from our mistakes, but like think about being Batman and making a mistake and it hideously disfigures your friend.
Right.
And makes him literally your mortal enemy for the rest of your life. Like
but this
that's
is a
like
bit different, right? Where they had to smuggle things in with Poindexter, right? To throw acid on him, right? First off, that's 100% the cop's fault. He could start busting a move, get sweaty, and his fucking, Macho Man, the dock worker outfit falls off, and he's in trouble, right? He's a celebrity. Right. This is the court of law, right? This is where he's not supposed to be helping.
It's Leon the Professional. It's not Macho Man dock worker.
Yeah, right. He looks like Leon the Professional streetwalker whenever he dresses like that. But what I'm saying is this is the court of law. This is not his arena, right? He might know something's wrong, but that's a little harder to be, all the way figured out. His stated fucking plan, him and Gordon, these two fucking... And that's the thing, Batman's not starting as like a rook on the force. You know what I mean? No. He's not a go get the coffee guy and fill out the paperwork. He's Batman. There's a basic threshold of intelligence.
He's not Farva, he's Batman.
Yeah. Not we're going to walk him out amongst high rises where there could be snipers. We're going to walk him through a fucking sewer tunnel, it looks like. Knowing Harvey's coming, Batman lets that fucking murder happen. And I think specifically because he wants Harvey to get his fucking revenge, man. It's one of those weird things that happens in the book that they just expect us to brush off. And I don't know if it's... I know some will say it's simply for dramatic reveal that bodyguard was Batman. Okay, fine.
Sure.
Here's what I don't believe, is that any fucking reader thinks that Batman was not going to be within 5 feet of that prisoner to capture Harvey. Point. So it's a weird scene that we really just gloss over, like, oh, shit, he killed that guy.
Right.
Whoops. And he had already talked to Calendar Man, who told him he knew who it was. This is how they got the information. Does Batman at that moment know it's Falcone? Because Batman says, like, oh, I didn't know. Is that a cover-up? Doth the Bat protest too much?
I could not tell you. That's a little... that's a deep dive, man.
The triplet killers at the end is like a whole thing we got to do. But I think Batman knew what was coming and let that fucking murder happen.
Right. So
there's no way that a normal reader can say that Batman is not complicit in that murder.
Right. So this ending we get is pretty spectacular, where we find Two-Face has like gotten into Falcone's basically Falcone's house and says, "This is my fucking city." Shoots Falcone, shoots his daughter Sophia, who's like apparently like the bruiser enforcer of the family.
She tackles Catwoman out of a window.
Right.
Because they have like Batman drops in with a gas grenade and just with one punch knocks everyone out, which really it takes the piss out of the double splash page we just did. We're like, cool. And then it's like, wait, fucking he's One Punch Man now? What the fuck?
Yeah, he's just one punching all these fools. Then Yeah, Catwoman pushes Sophia out the window, which is awesome.
Seemingly
like
to what would be her demise, yes.
What would be her demise? Obviously, if you read Dark Victory, you know that's different.
Right.
And then
she is giant.
Well, yeah, she's huge. She's like she's a beefy New Jersey gal for sure.
She's got that Hulk build.
Yeah, she's from New Jersey.
Fools,
so, basically, Two-Face then turns himself into Batman and Gordon, saying like, "Yeah, I know what I did was wrong, so I'm doing it." Like, this is like the weird dichotomy of the justice that now pervades over his mind, is like it's right and wrong, it's black and white.
Right.
So,
there is a
however,
big
what
in this moment though, right?
But he lets loose. There were 2 holiday killers. One being Alberto.
Not only that. Okay, so wait. I have 3 questions that I need you to answer, right? I'm with you. I love the ending of this where Harvey feels like he is only proving a point, right? He's not psychotic Two-Face. He is, in this moment, he's not the second face. He's Harvey still, which is fascinating. Normally, Harvey's kind of the sniveling weak one you can get to. Harvey's the one who pulls that trigger, not the burnt side. So I really like that. Oh, this is just. He even says, I think he's like, I haven't given up on everything I believe in when he turns himself in. Right? Kind of saying like, I did it. What all you guys didn't do, I fucking did in one night, and it was super easy, right? But so he says, you know that there. Did he say 2 or more than 1? He said there were 2 killers.
I think he said there was 2 killers.
2 holiday killers, right? So that's 1. And I forgot the other question. I forgot the other wildly important question. But yeah, so because they never, this is the part of the book that's always been a bit of a sticking point with me, is so Calendar Man claims to know what's up. The Riddler seemingly would know what's up, right?
Right.
Does Batman just get this wrong?
Yeah.
I feel like that's nonsense.
I don't, because I think this is like, again, this is the version of this. This is like the important distinction about what this story is, because we talked about it in the very beginning and you made it crystal clear. Batman really does function as kind of a background character in a lot of respects in this story. Like the person who's front and center and the person who is making the stakes for us in this story is Harvey. Harvey's story, Harvey's back and forth with his wife, Harvey's pursuit of justice is really what's pulling us in and drawing us closer and closer to this inevitable demise.
He's the body, Gordon's the angel, Batman's the devil.
Right. At the very start of this book, we all know what happens to, like, this is like kind of one of the really fun things about this book is there's absolutely nothing about what's going on in here that is shocking. We all know that this is what happens to Harvey Dent because we've all read a comic, seen a cartoon, watched a movie, like so on and so forth. Like this came out in 96, 97. Batman Forever had already come out. So, you know, we all know
the pretty accurate portrayal.
But we all know the basics. We all know who Harvey Dent becomes in the Batman universe. We all know what happens.
You know what on that point, before we lose it, the inevitability of Harvey Dent is spectacularly done in this book, because I thought it was so weird that they reveal that he's like, I have evidence that Bruce Wayne is in on it. And I read that and it struck me as that very Benedict Cumberbatch, I'm Khan. Yeah, we know. What are you talking about? It's a weird moment in the book because as a reader, there's no reader who plausibly is like, oh, fuck, is Bruce in on it? We all know he's not, so it's only to show us the futility of Harvey Dent's struggle. It's a really good extra small beat in there. It functions on many levels. But anyways, I digress.
Sure. So we get to this ending. He says there were 2 holiday killers. Gordon doesn't understand because Falcone essentially admitted to all the killings.
Okay, so here's a question. Is it 2 or is it 3?
It's 2.
Or is it 1? We don't technically have any evidence
this is something
except for the only evidence we have. Killing Falcone is obviously Harvey, right?
All right. Actually, I'll take it back. There were 2, but neither of them were Alberto Falcone.
His wife assumes that because he came home wet when he had a hat on, that and that is talking about the murder of Falcone, I believe, who's not dead.
Well, I think that
she says he must have picked it up and ran with it, so that could have been either of the guys.
She was clearly doing it, and then he took it over.
She she killed the first couple, obviously, which does not answer the biggest question of the book, which is how is she getting so close to these guys? Right? Like, I mean, even these guys would be like, who's this?
Honestly,
she talks about making herself unspectacular, right, to avoid Batman. So maybe that's the theory.
But regardless, I think again, she has easily, like, of all the monologues and all the voiceover in this book, she has easily the most, like, gut wrenching and awesome. Like, not just because it's the ending, but she literally, like they're turning this into a 2-part animated movie. I cannot fucking wait to hear who they voice cast for this actress, because whoever it is has to be fucking awesome. Granted, I'm sure they'll fuck it up.
Not be 4 hours long.
Yeah. Well, granted, also I'm sure they'll fuck it up and add some stupid thing with Batgirl fucking Batman and ruin the whole thing. Whatever.
Harvey just comes home and Barbara's just munching box with his wife, and he's like, "This is why I'm of two faces."
We were just talking about things that are going to get us canceled. Definitely the phrase "munching box" is one of them.
Everyone loves the box.
So, I think ultimately,
I was talking about hot box. What are you talking about?
Oh, sorry, copy that.
Pizza joint.
Yeah, I think that ultimately, like Gilda does all this for the sake of family, for the sake of wanting to live a better life than just because we find out in the book also that Harvey's father's like a raving lunatic in an insane asylum as well. She's basically trying to avoid that eventuality because I think she knows deep down that he's unsavable. But because she finishes with "I believe in Harvey Dent," she totally thinks that she like it's the love of a wife who believes in what her husband's doing. Like, that's like the truest and saddest ending of any of these books is definitely Gilda Dent saying "I believe in Harvey Dent." Like, there's just nothing more.
Well, it's heavy because it's not just that she believes in Harvey, but she believes in that kind of worst side of Harvey that believes the law in his entire life's work was not up to snuff.
She believes in the justice that he doled out as Holiday / Two-Face now.
Yeah, like, again, she started, right?
Yeah.
And it's fascinating. It comes right after Batman does his "I believe in Batman." Was it worth it? I don't know. We lost Harvey, but I got to punch those guys, one punch style. So that was cool. But was it worth it? Doesn't matter. I believe in Batman.
It's truly a fascinating dive into not just Batman's psyche or Gordon's psyche, but really the story is about the evolution of Harvey Dent from seeker of justice and law to seeker of justice no matter the cost.
But I would say it's even more than that, which is there's this kind of Gilda becomes the one truly innocent of the book that is destroyed. Other than the coroner, right?
Sure.
So by the end of the book, we're sitting there asking this question: was it worth it? Was it worth it? I don't know. We lost Harvey. I think that's what Gordon says. I'll have to think on it.
Right.
We shouldn't ask if we lost Harvey. Harvey was lost because he was in this spiral downward into this "I will fix Gotham and bring justice," which never can happen in Gotham, right? Yeah. If Batman was really a good superhero, Gotham would be cleaned up. It's not. It's a never-ending cesspool of terribleness, right? Harvey's lost. Gilda just wanted a husband, just wanted a kid, just wanted the life that people who are always claiming they're fighting for truth and justice are claiming they're providing. She is the true innocent that is driven mad, not Harvey.
Sure.
I think that's the devastating part of her story.
That's the devastating thing of the book. Like, there are probably 4 or 5 tangential plots you can take and make your own. Like, yes, Batman learns the very, very, very hard way that he, A, is not going to save Gotham, and B, he's also not going to save his friend. Dent learns that he feels better with, justice at any cost. Gilda, though, Gilda learns that she is not. Gilda learns that justice is the only thing that her husband really cared about. She's the person she was the caring side of Harvey that was forcing him into doing something that he didn't want to do. Like, Gilda absolutely is this, like, truly tragic figure within the book. Everyone else sort of hits their eventuality. Gilda, who's not a character we see very often in comics, is 100% like the victim of this entire story.
Well, here's the really sad, I think, biggest point of this, right? Is, again, the coroner is an innocent who dies.
Right.
Every other character thinks they win the story.
Right.
Except for Gilda, who I believe in Harvey Dent, right? She's lost Harvey. He's now this Two-Face character. She believes in his... He just takes over her mission. So she doesn't even get to complete her grand work, which may be some kind of catharsis for her.
Right.
What you realize is that this mission, she thinks, is the only way that Harvey can love her.
Totally.
It becomes a fetish in a way, right? He comes home and is excited that these guys are dead. She is providing him some measure of love and joy, right? All three of the other guys, Harvey thinks he's right and wins. Gordon thinks he did right and won. Batman thinks he won the day. Gilda, on a really deep level, right, knows she lost this story. She still has that kind of, well, I have to believe in something, but the thing she believes in is all the way gone. It doesn't exist anymore. She knows she lost. And that is the fucking sad, perfect way to end this book, is that in Gotham, you cannot win, right? So these men spend this long Halloween trying to play superhero to avoid the inevitability, which is Gilda. This city will eat you up. You will become evil eventually. And it's never worth it. That's what I think this... It's kind of sad. I guess that's a glum read on it. You could say it's totally worth it.
But it's not.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's the... I think the moral of most superheroes, as I tell my son, is that, if you have the ability to do something that is right when others can't, you should do that. And putting something on the line for, like, Into the Spider-Verse does that great, right? Like, I get back up because I have to. No one else can do it. That's a classic superhero trope, and I think it's very aspirational for us. I think this book takes a step back, and again, by having Batman just as a specter looming over the story, we really do sit and look at the human consequences of this.
Right.
And just looking at Gilda in those last couple pages makes you feel like none of this was worth it.
I mean,
it's a bummer.
I can't put it any better than that, honestly. Like, it's a bummer, but it's such a well-written bummer. You still sort of just, it's hard not to get a charge out of it.
I'm a little confused still as to if Falcone ever killed anyone. I know he killed Maroni.
I don't think he did.
So in a way, he has one confirmed kill. So he is a holiday killer. But
I
again,
suppose.
you know what's funny? He's another guy who has to falsely say he won. He is the other innocent victim of the book, is Alberto Falcone.
I suppose. Well, yeah, I mean, he's the one who's
He does desperately want to be involved in the crime business.
He's the one who's least
not
liked.
A good one. But he is just a guy who went to school and he's like, I just want to. I'll be in crime if it means my dad will love me. It's a very parallel journey to Gilda. Granted, he goes. I guess they both go off the deep ends. They're both terrible, tragic figures.
Guys, it's a wonderful book. If you read it with us, great. If not, go out and buy it or read it or do whatever you must. I absolutely adore this entire, the entirety of this book. I even like the sequel, which is a little bit maligned, Dark Victory, if you feel like picking that up.
It just never hits the heights, but it's a good read.
It's never as good, but it's still a good read. It does include Griffey's favorite character, Robin, and that in and of itself, guys.
That's when Two-Face gets the chainsaw and cuts Robin in half. He starts wearing half a Robin. It's fucking grotesque. I love that scene.
Guys, that's been our book club for this month. Batman The Long Halloween. Go out and read it. Whatever comic book store you decide to go to, pick it up. You know it's there. As always, catch us on all our social media, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. Catch us on YouTube. If you're watching us on YouTube right now, check us out, Nerd Alchemist. Tell your friends. And then, of course, go to our other show, the Film Alchemist Podcast. We are ending an epic run this month. We watched all the Friday the 13th, all of the Nightmare on Elm Streets, and we're ending it right with Freddy versus Jason on Halloween. Guys, what a fun time. And not only that, we're following it up next month, The Pod Breaks Bread. All movies with sort of awkward dinner scenes. We figured that'd be
scene, yeah.
Yeah, we figured that'd be appropriate for the coming month, which includes the most infamous dinner scene of all time, whatever Thanksgiving you're going to. Guys, check it all out. We got a lot of fun stuff coming up. As always, we hope you're having a lovely day, evening, morning, whatever time you're listening to us. From the Long Box Sessions, I'm Alex Dandino.
And I'm Cannoli from Italy. Just kidding. Josh Griffin.
I honestly have nothing else to say past that.